Hello everyone, what's up? In this Iron Hands metallic black tutorial, I'm going to show you how to recreate the chipped, worn out black which the Iron Hands Legion sport in the Horus Heresy artwork. With this Rhino as an example, we'll look at the metallic undercoat, the black topcoat, and how to create realistic chipping effects. Towards the end of the video, I will also give you a summary of the rest of the weathering process. Do you want to start a new Iron Hands army? Or perhaps you're looking for a new metallic black recipe? Either way, this video is for you. This is the Rhino before I started with the metallic undercoat. The primer I used was AK black primer with microfiller. I let it dry for 24 hours, which gives you a matte and super tough finish. For the undercoat, also known as the chipping layer, I went with stainless steel from the AK Extreme Metals range. As you can see, my first pass with the airbrush is extremely gentle. I'm spraying far more air than paint and not even trying to achieve opacity in one go. I always go around the vehicle once before I start progressively adding more and more paint. The trick here is trigger control. Even though my Badger Patriot 105 has a rather large needle, Extreme Metals paints allow you to restrict paint flow without getting dry tip or any clogging whatsoever, which is what would happen with an acrylic if you were to spray in this fashion. Another thing that you will notice is that I keep the airbrush constantly in motion. This prevents paint from accumulating in any one spot. Regarding these AK paints, bear in mind that these are enamel paints, and as such, they're a pleasure to airbrush and pretty tough when cured, but highly toxic. So unlike in a recent AK interactive video, make absolutely sure to wear a respirator and to use an extractor booth when using these. Something that may surprise you is that I also paint the bottom of the vehicle. In fact, I always do this. The reason for that is to make sure that every nook and cranny gets covered. And in this case, I also wanted to get the tracks painted. As you can see, the finished result looks really good, if I may say so myself. Even with this white background, which doesn't showcase the metallic very well, I'm sure you can tell that this is a pretty realistic finish. Time for a spot of chipping fluid. This transparent water-based liquid should be airbrushed in a couple of coats at a pressure of around 20 psi. Flooding the area wouldn't be a problem here, but that would just increase the drying times, so I would avoid that if I were you. Frankly, there is not much to see here, right? So let's speed things up. As you can see, I covered the tracks with masking tape to avoid wasting time later. Anyway, after letting the Rhino dry for about 20 minutes, it was time for the black top coat. For this I chose Tamiya LP5 Semi-Gloss Black, which is a pure lacquer paint. I thinned this 50% with Mr. Color Leveling Thinner, and I sprayed it at around 20 psi. Even more so than with the steel, I wanted to make sure to build opacity very slowly and very gradually. As you can see, my first pass with the airbrush was so subtle that it looked more like shading than a top coat. This is no coincidence perhaps, as this is my favorite paint for shading in the first place. The reason for this is that lacquer paints like this one are far more transparent than acrylics or enamels. This also means that at the same rate of dilution, you will need quite a lot of coats to achieve complete opacity. But lacquer paints also dry so quickly that this is rarely a problem. In this particular case, however, I was kind of tempting fate, as this paint dries so quickly that the chipping fluid will stop reacting to water after a while. Now this depends a lot on thinner and other factors like humidity and temperature, but there was an element of risk. It is not the first time that I paint a vehicle very carefully with Tamiya lacquers, only to find out later that no matter how much water or friction I want to use, the paint will not be chipped any longer. Thankfully, however, that wasn't the case here, as you shall presently see. Time for the real magic to happen. The first thing to do is to apply some water on the area to be chipped using a flat brush. The amount of water and working time depends mostly on the combination of paint and thinner used. With this much water and the friction I'm applying, a paint like Vallejo Model Air would already have come off in big flakes by now, so do be careful. If you haven't seen me do this before, you might be thinking that I went completely crazy here. Yes, I'm in fact using an old airbrush needle to create small incisions in the top coat. As those of you who have been with the Rest for Terra for a long time will know, this is what I call needle chipping. Right now you can't see much because of the reflections on the water, but I think you're going to be pretty impressed in a minute. As you can see, I'm going along panel lines and protruding details using either the flat of the needle or its tip, depending on the situation. As my good friend and loyal supporter, Rick, has put it before, this is like reverse edge highlighting. Now I'm coming in with an old flat brush with really hard bristles in order to finish the job. This takes advantage of the incisions that we made with the needle, and it can get you really good results. An intermediate tool is a toothpick, which you can use in areas where the needle might be a little bit too risky. Either way, the use of lacquer paints with a very potent thinner, like Mr. Color, guarantees that you will need to be quite aggressive in order to get any chipping at all. In the past, I always used AK's own thinner, which results in a much softer paint. But the results I got here were clearly superior thanks to the much higher degree of control that this thinner gave me. So in summary, so long as you don't let the paint dry for too long, I think the harder paint that this results in is a winning combo. Now for one of the side doors. One thing that you can see even better here is how the black paint clearly repels water, almost like a car that's being waxed. The reason for this is that this is a semi-gloss, not a matte black paint. Here I opted to start with the brush straight away, given that there were a lot of surface details, which I knew the brush would catch easily. I must say this was as satisfying to do for me as it looks, guys. If you haven't tried this technique before, you really are missing out. As you can see, the chipping effect is super progressive and controllable despite the pretty crazy amount of friction that I'm applying. To be honest, I think this is the best example of chipped black paint that I've done to date. Check that out. So what else did this project entail? Well, the main job after this was applying the decals and then getting them weathered. Next came a very generous enamel wash, followed by the inevitable cleaning up operation. After that I went straight into pigments and I covered all the tracks, the exhausts and the lower area of the chassis with them. Lastly, I applied a lighter enamel wash to all rivets and to the exhaust sacks. Other than the lenses and a few touch-ups here and there, that was pretty much it. Now the emphasis here wasn't on doing my best, but on getting my son, a good-looking Rhino, ready for our next game at my school club. In other words, what you could call speed weathering. The entire process took me 2.5 hours from start to finish, which I think is pretty good given the results. If I had airbrushed liquid pigments instead of using traditional pigments, I think I could have reduced that to a maximum of 2 hours. Anyways, I hope that you've enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed applying chipping to those black panels. Do let me know in the comments which other weathering techniques you would like to see me apply in the next few videos. Before I let you go, I would like to thank all of my YouTube members. Your generous support means a lot to me and it helps me keep the lights on. That is all from me for now, folks, but remember, keep it up and weather it out.